I just have to say this again. I have two Charleses in studio. Charles Mujui, Charles Kipkule. We're discussing matters BBI. And before we took the break and took those links, I took that particular link from Mandera County. I had asked, Charles Kipkule had talked about how the DP is simply echoing what the president has said on the report. Do you agree? Is he simply echoing what the president has said in the report? Because my argument is this, the president has time and again talked about how we should be discussing matters development, politics of succession. As late as Sagana, he was saying, you know, let's put that on the back burner. Let's deliver to Kenyans what we promised them. And he was talking to Mount Kenya leaders, and there we've had some discontent, people saying that development, they haven't gotten what they bargained for. Or rather, they haven't gotten their side of the deal in voting in President Uhuru Kenyatta. But then again, you see DP William Ruto, as much as when he goes out to various counties, various constituencies, various wards, as much as he says, you know, right now we should be talking about development and not BBI, his lieutenants still bring it up. They still bring 2022 up. So do you agree that the deputy president is simply echoing what the president has said?
I think he does that and more. What he does is brilliant. He says that and very quickly just throws in one word that is going to be the bite, and he knows it. He knows the moment you talk about the tsunami and Raila, everything else that you have said will not feature prominently in any discussion. That's why we're having that discussion in the first instance. If we went to that meeting yesterday, to that church, and said the report is coming out, we're going to receive it, and then we're going to give it to you, you read, and then we analyze it, and then based on that we make decisions as a country, we will not be talking about this, trust me. We'll be waiting for the report tomorrow. But the moment he brings out an issue that happened several weeks or months ago about the tsunami, and whatever that means, by the way, then he knows. And then his lieutenants, like you rightfully put it, pick it up from there, and they turn the whole BBI report into just about the structure of the executive. Yeah, moving forward, and if nobody's saying anything else. So
there's political dishonesty there.
It's just about that. Everyone wants us to believe that BBI is about the executive, the structure of the executive moving forward, and you know it. I know it. If you're talking about resources, you've had this argument now: 1 shilling, 1 man, 1 vote. That is beginning traction in areas that are populous, that have a huge population, Kakamega, Kiambu. They've started talking about that. They're saying that is the direction we need to go. That is key, because it's about shared, we share what we have. And you cannot share with trees. You're sharing with human beings, individuals that were counted, 47 million. Where are they? Those are the people that need medical services. Those are the people who need support infrastructure and infrastructure, schools and all those things. Those are the people you're talking about. That requires amending the constitution. Article 89, we cannot say that we have to wait until elections come because we have a problem with a possibility of someone pushing the agenda of the executive. Remember, if you're talking about amending the constitution, if you look at the constitution itself in Article 255, 256, 257, it is clear. We are talking about questions. We don't just bring out a whole report, BBI report, and say, do you accept this in a referendum question? It doesn't work like that. You ask specific questions. Do you agree with this kind of a structure for the executive? If you don't like it, assuming we get there, then you say no. But on the other issues of how we share what we have, do you believe in this? You say yes. Then we pass what we are passing. We don't. We reject what we are rejecting. And I don't even think we have gotten there, because this report will go through a lot of processes. Like I said, the implementing agencies are so many, because we have the national executive, we have the county executive on issues of policy. That will happen almost immediately. There are issues of law that will need to be amended so that we can look at all these things. We've seen how procurement and procedures are being flouted by county governments and even national government. Those are issues that will be addressed. We are talking about there could be a possibility of amending the constitution to be able to have this on board, the issues that we have raised. But when you put it in such a way that we are just here purely on one issue of the structure of the executive, I don't think one is being honest, number one. Number two, to me, and you'll prove me wrong, maybe a few years from now or a few months from now, maybe, just maybe, the DP would not mind an expanded executive, but he must look like he's the one who is fighting for there not to be that, because he would be the one person who would benefit from having a deputy prime minister coming from Mombasa, deputy this coming from elsewhere. He'll be able to consolidate his support. And you've seen he has started promising quite a number of people across the country all manner of positions. You've seen people saying, I'm the next running mate. quite a number of people that have gotten that promise, not from no less a person than himself. He could be a beneficiary, but ultimately, if we get there, people will be saying, we are voting for you to punish the ones that brought us here. And that is a possibility. And I'm saying it's far-fetched, it may be, but that could also be a possibility. To me, in politics, expect anything. This could be part of what is going on. But importantly, I wish the leadership, especially at his level, would tone down, let us get this report so that even Kenyans can read it across. They will not just jump into the aspect of how is the structure of the national executive moving forward in as far as the report is concerned. And you'll see people do that. And the people you invite here for analysis will only be talking about maybe that. They will ignore everything else that is really critical and just move into that aspect.
Okay. Charles Kipkule, have they effectively achieved perhaps what some say is the objective, which is to water it down such that it is DOA, dead on arrival?
Not really, Oliver. I think when you listen to these political leaders speaking, particularly MPs, maybe senators and all of them, these are representatives of the people. And when they go out there to speak, they are speaking from the perspective of the people they represent. And because of that, when it comes to the BBI, they cascade it down to the needs and the issues of the people, which is where now conversations are emerging about now the issues that my friend is talking about, one man, one vote. Parliamentary versus presidential system, how does it advantage or disadvantage us? So that issue of us now is coming in. That is now, it's the voices of the people. Because I think when you go around the country right now, the issues that are so pertinent to Kenyans are kitchen table issues. It's about bread and butter. But now, there is a bit of difficulty in terms of now transforming these issues into, or even bringing them into the BBI, because the BBI has a clear 9-point agenda. It talks about devolution. If you work on devolution properly, then some of these issues are going to be addressed. There is a question about security. Now, if you address the issue of security, then it's going to be there. Shared prosperity. What does it talk about? So the problem is that it's the language which is coming from the people, which to me shows that the people want a conversation that is proximate to their needs, which is now coming from the MPs. And that way you just have to give it to them. Politicians will have to talk about it. But at the national level, it has now become about the structure of the executive, because then this affects probably the 2020, the succession question. Because now it's about competition. There is a question of divisive elections, inclusivity. I think out of the 9 points, inclusivity is the issue that has gotten the highest form of political attention. Probably I expected even electoral reforms, because there is a question of divisive elections, which is part of the 9 points, which should have also been a matter that should have been canvassed at a better level. But because I want also to not to disobey my president, to say that you don't discuss what you don't know, maybe we will not preempt the report. But the idea that what you're getting here is that listening to the political leaders, my point is that for them, they are representing the interest and the wishes of their people, which for Kenya are diverse. That is why I said earlier that this is building bridges. It's many bridges, and it has to be a national conversation. It is a democratic project. It's just like any other project. And for that to happen, let every leader speak. Let the people feel that their voices have been heard. I heard the MP from Suna, I think, who said, for a very long time, our people have never been elected to power at the presidential level. So for them, the perception of the BBI is that it's going to deliver probably the presidency. Others probably are looking at the economic question. Others are looking at how are we going to prosper, probably how are we going to have a form of improvement on ourselves. So listening to politicians, they're actually just telling us what their people are thinking about this BBI. And for it to work very well, it has to be a national conversation, away from just two persons, but to go down and cascade it to every Kenyan. Of course, they went round. They spoke to Kenyans, but listening to the president of late, he said that if it has to go to a process that requires further probably constitutional change, then it is going to be through a consultative process. Then you are looking more again at a national conversation like a Bombers conference, where now Kenyans come together and they speak.
Yeah,
and that would be a good thing. And he gave an assurance, which is very good. And even repeated it when he was in Kibabii, the university, during the graduation.
All right. Yeah. Charles Munywe,
yes.
There's a lot of speculation as to why it took a month, or it's taken a month, for the president to receive this report. I think the term limit for the task force that was charged with generating this report expired a month ago. Yes. And we thought, okay, We kept waiting. Tomorrow it didn't happen. Now we received communication last week was it on Friday, that the report would be handed over tomorrow. Why do you think there was that delay? Was it a reading of the public mood, or as the Nation opined in an article over the weekend, the changes incorporated by, was it to give the time for changes from Raila Odinga's team and Uhuru Kenyatta's team to be incorporated into the report?
I think we read too much into it. If you ask me, my concern would not really be how long it took to hand the report, because the report was ready. At the time it was supposed to be ready, they even gave a statement and said the report is ready to hand over to the president. So we are making arrangements on how this will be given to the president. Remember, there was Kibra. I think if the report came in just before Kibra or around that Kibra time, it would not have made a lot of sense, because people are profiled into thinking Kibra and politics of who is in whose bedroom, who is in whose living room, and what they are doing in the living room. A story for another day. I think what should be important and what we must build on is what happens with this report, because I've seen a lot of task force reports being ignored, being just shelved and forgotten, and nobody is doing anything about it. This is something Kenyans have invested in, Kenyans have talked about, Kenyans have participated in, and courtesy of media like yourself and social media, people have now come of age in terms of understanding how government works, especially on matters of task forces and how that gets implemented. To me, what we must build on is the implementation of what we're going to have moving forward in as far as the recommendations of the BBI, and the communication aspect from them should improve. I know their term is gone, maybe something else is going to come, but it is important that there's communication. Up to today, people believe BBI is one thing, that we are rejecting it or we are accepting it, and I think that it's not the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be about a report on different issues. So that communication moving forward should be there, so that even these fears that people have, that you have a task force charged with the responsibility of doing this, and it has taken all that time moving around, and then they need an extra 1 month to play around with a report that they worked on themselves. I think that is not necessarily true, much as I don't have the facts, but I can tell you for free, it doesn't matter what happens post when the report was ready. Ultimately, when this report is made public, every Kenyan will have an opportunity to have a voice heard on the respective issues that have been raised. And even if it's an issue of law, amending the law or amending the constitution, there is the aspect of public participation that is required by law that will also be there. So I don't see how anybody would think that by closing it up and saying this is now what we have ultimately, that is it. It cannot be amended, it cannot be changed, it's cast in stone. So that to me is a reasoning, and I am praying that people now will understand the process moving forward, that there are issues that will be resolved immediately, sorted out almost immediately by the national executive, the county executive, the legislature at both levels of government. There are issues that will require the Senate styling up, the National Assembly coming strongly and working on these things, and there are issues that might require, I don't know, a referendum. To me, there are issues that will definitely require a referendum. If you're talking about 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote, that will require a referendum. Forget about what the structure of the national executive. There should be a referendum to address that, against a backdrop of the fact that we have 47 million people that need to have resources in there. And I'll give you an example. Okay, when we counted these people very quickly, we had 47. Their governors were told their people, come and get counted in my county, in your respective counties where you got born. But they got counted where they reside. That's where the resources should be. So we need these figures, because with that population, knowing that in Kiambu we have 2.4 million people, if you look at the voters, you'll find there will be way less, because their pool will go and vote elsewhere. But you reside in Kiambu. That is what is important. That is where you live. That is where resources should come, because that's where you need the resources.
Okay. Charles Kipkule, yeah. Do you think perhaps we were reading too much into that delay?
No, I think looking at this, this is about, there are two things here. First of all, there is a president who is involved. A president has an itinerary that is so tight, and also the national...
It's not like Ambassador Martin Kimani. That's what, okay, that was the explanation he gave. He said actually, presidents get busy.
Actually, and the reason is this, because look at it. It is very rare for you to find the president dedicating at least 2 days to a similar activity, because now we are talking about handing over that will be done tomorrow, and then on Wednesday there is going to be an unveiling. So when you look at allocating 2 days to a presidential out of the presidential diary, and then you consider other prevailing national priorities, because we had a lot of things going around. There were heads of state coming over and everything. That will be my informed guess. I'll still insist it's a guess. But again, when you're a pilot and you're landing a plane, and you come in, you want to go to the runway, and there's a lot of winds, you can't land. You just have to circle up until things are okay. So probably again, probably reading the public mood, the concessions may have been made in order to accommodate this prevailing public mood, which is being read anyway, so that when you bring a document to the people, the level of buy-in is to a level that is satisfactory, so that you do not then go and require too much political heavy lifting to push it as if it is like you're forcing a document to Kenyans. So I think it's a question of timing, but also in honesty, a presidential diary is not something that you just allocate time like this, especially when you are looking at an event that has been given 2 days. So in summary, I think it is statecraft, just how the state works and manages its affairs.
All right, so all right, so we should not read too much into it. You said you don't think there are amendments. You know that time was to give the two sides time to make amendments to the report. Okay, but what of the argument that, which we've mentioned, that this report has done more alienating than including?
Yeah, because of the way it was handled. Like I said, the deputy president and his team came out very strongly against it from the word go, and they harped on that aspect of the national executive, and they were saying this is a way of ensuring it does not ascend to power in 2022. And the handshake in itself, the coming together of Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, was purely about Uhuru supporting Raila Odinga for the presidency in 2022. And there was a lot of activity to make Kenyatta look unpopular in Mount Kenya region, so that in the event the handshake is about supporting Raila, then he will not be able to move, quote unquote, because that is nothing further from the truth, the masses from that region to support the person that he picks on. And that there was a lot of energy around that. And when politicians put energy on an issue of that nature, then there will be repercussions, and then there will be divisions. And you've seen them. You've seen people reading BBI from all manner of angles. That has been there. That discussion has been there, and it is true. What should have happened very quickly, there should have been more briefs on what is happening and what BBI is all about. There should have been professionals that are working with BBI explaining the process, and how there was even an issue of people talking about legitimacy, and how Raila, being part of this, can be able to draw from the exchequer, I mean from the government coffers, by way of a product that he has created in the name of Building Bridges Task Force. All that information or misinformation was put out there in the public domain, and people believed it. There were discussions by professionals on whether this process in itself is legal. Someone even went to court, I think, or court on the same. So the process has come from far, and people have cut it left, right, and center, to the extent that where it is today, it has bruises and a lot of, makeup to cover up what has been, the bashing that has happened to the report. I think, to me, what is important moving forward is communication from no less a person than the deputy president himself on how these processes work, so that Kenyans can understand, because there are very serious issues raised by the two principles, for lack of a better way of putting it, for this particular BBI arrangement. And those issues, like I said earlier, cut across. They affect the people William Ruto represents, the people Raila represents, the people everyone else represents. I think, to me, it is a time that Ruto became now properly part of the presidency in terms of what the BBI is all about. By way of saying, we have a report. Like I said, you cannot repeat this enough times. Read it, understand it, let us have a discussion around it. And like the president said, there might be issues that you're not comfortable with. Let us come to the table again as a country and discuss issues around that. If the deputy president would do that, and his lieutenants naturally will follow through, because they'll follow him in that direction, then you'll find a country that is able to discuss this report, look at it, and implement what needs to be implemented for the sake of Kenyans. And Kenyans cut across. It's not just about Raila, it's not about Ruto, it's not about Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, the president.
All right.
Yes.
You talked about reports that have previously been written and shoved into shelves. Charles Kipkule, part of the challenge, those with knowledge of the process, say the BBI team faced was figuring out whether or not they should incorporate some of the recommendations that were already made by the TJRC report, which recommendations which I think are yet even to be discussed in Parliament. What challenge do you see that the TJRC report posing to this process?
Well, you see, the issue of the TJRC is a matter that is important but also very sensitive. And it is one of the reports that has even been subjected to litigation because people have gone trying to expand their names and everything from those reports. And when now we are addressing the issue of the BBI and we want to address issues of historical injustice and truth, justice and reconciliation as captured in the TJRC report, I think the challenge will have been now balancing refocusing the BBI to the 9 points that were there, and then also trying to borrow from the reports that had already been done. So the only challenge I will see is in terms of the sensitivity around the TJRC report that was there and many other reports. Even the Ndungu land report is a sensitive issue. It will deal with land issues, but for it to be implemented, there are going to be casualties that will require then a lot of goodwill and a lot of difficult decisions to be made. So that is the challenge that surrounds the idea of incorporating these reports. And then again, we have institutions which were created. I think they were called Agenda 4 institutions. They were created after 2007, and then they came into the Constitution. And they were tasked mainly with overseeing or implementing some of the issues that are related to this. So the challenge that came was that when the BBI task force was going around, they did not engage strongly at the institutional level. Rather, they chose to go at the grassroots. So that then brought a challenge because we are not able to see, because the TJRC report, at this point, I look at it mostly like even a government report is already there. So it could come in at a recommendation level that we need to do this, but they may not then go and say we are picking from this and then we need to have it incorporated because these things are already there. But because of the sensitivity that we know around them, then it becomes a challenge, and also the problem that they had where they did not involve institutions very strongly. But I think I will also wish to comment on the issue that my friend in my community, people who share a common name, we call each other Kaine. So
you call each other?
we call each other Kaine, so it's my Kaine. Yeah. That
Okay.
means namesake. Yeah. So my Kaine here, we've been discussing the issue of the idea of the BBI as being divisive and not achieving the unity that it intended to achieve. The problem came because of the mismanagement of the process at some level, or not even mismanagement, actually misbehavior at some levels. Because as I stated earlier, if you read the original statement, it was March 9th March, when it was read, when the handshake was done, it was very clear that this is what we need to do, and the two of us symbolize the problems that have bedeviled this country for a very long time. But going forward, we are putting into motion a national conversation, and it was guided by a 9-point agenda. But now, when afterwards, the immediate talk that came afterwards was that BBI, the handshake, is about a political pact, that is about a succession plan, that going forward now, this is now a change of things as we know. But when you looked at the insistence, especially from the president, he kept telling Kenyans, and even in Sagana, he told people, I have no political deal with anybody. And these are not issues that should be ignored. But because of the mischaracterization of the BBI outside the 9 points that it was meant to achieve, and also the notion that it was solely about a referendum and not seeking to address other issues which could be achieved through maybe strengthening institutions and even administrative action. And even if you need to change laws, the referendum is the last resort. You can even go to parliament and have these laws put in place, and most of these issues will be achieved. So the problem was that in some quarters, a referendum was the only, in some quarters, if you don't have a referendum, then there's no BBI. And because the reason is that if there's a referendum, then we have a new baby born, which is another new political alliance. So you see, you look at the BBI in terms of what is in it for everybody, which is why I think I heard Honorable Moses Kuria speaking, and he said we need to interrogate the honesty and the intention of every leader who is involved in the BBI. When you go to that level, then you are able to remove some of the lenses and see, well, we have 9 points. But apart from these 9 points, what does this person need? What does this one need? What does this one need? And then we look at the greater national picture, which is Kenya.
Okay.
And then from there, we can be able to go forward. But if you proceed the way we are right now, with the mismanagement around it, including mischaracterization of the reports and the president himself, that people will come and say, President Uhuru Kenyatta, we want you to rule beyond 2022. And he said over and time again that I want to leave Kenya with a legacy. He is indicating that he wants to leave a better country. But you want to force him to even go against the constitution and impose himself through some other means, then we get it wrong. So that issue, and then when you remember also, there's been this conversation about the constitutional making process in 2010 and all around that, how we came to the document that we had. You remember the Kilifi report, you remember when they went to Naivasha, you remember how the bombers and how everything ended up not coming into be, because I was reading this morning some commentaries saying that the bombers report was the best. It proposed a parliamentary system, but because certain quarters were not comfortable with it, they changed things. Kilifi report was mutilated, you know what happened and all of that. It is because there was personal interest which superseded the larger project. So the tragedy and the lesson that Kenyans need to learn right now is that as we go forward with the BBI, we should not engage in this process with individuals in mind. So that when we are changing constitutions, it should not be about individuals. Yes. It should be about Kenya and posterity. How are we going to solidify the gains of the report and also the gains of democracy that we've made so far? And then we have a process that will take us many years to come. But if we proceed the way we are proceeding right now, as I said earlier, then we may need another handshake or maybe another report, another BBI, every election cycle.
Yeah.
Kaine,
So
if you allow me to comment on...
just take, I need to give you a pen and paper. Just take note of that. You'll remember. Keep it in the vault. You've talked about this mischaracterization, misrepresentation. Has President Uhuru Kenyatta, has he failed us on that front? Should he have been more vocal on what the BBI is all about? Because they shook hands, and then we had very little from him with regard to it. We had Raila Odinga talk about, we've had him time and again talk about it, saying, be patient, it's coming out, and then we've had Ruto be vocal about it, but not President Uhuru Kenyatta so much championing it. And we only had from him on this report when he's been pushed to the wall.
I think before I get there, let me touch on TJRC just one tiny minute and say, I think it is wrong to say it is not being implemented. Remember, Uhuru apologized in Parliament. He gave a national apology as required by that report. Number two, he gave 10 billion shillings for reparation and restorative justice. For the same, I think Parliament has failed us on this issue of TJRC, but I think we'll come and have that discussion later. But it's wrong to imagine that TJRC report, as it is not being implemented. Having said that, Uhuru did his part. He formed a task force and gave it resources. And when he was called to do it, he gave them an extension of time so that they could go to every county in this country to listen to the people. Because initially they had balkanized counties and said we want to only listen to what the feedback or from in these particular areas. But he gave them that extension, and by that it means more resources. And when you form a task force, and you give it a mandate, and you give it timelines, and you give it how the framework on how to operate, what you need to do is sit back and give that team the time and the resources to bring back that report to you. And then, because when you get that report, ideally, if you look at what they had said in the first instance, they had said this is how we are going to implement what we have arrived at. And it starts by forming this team, supporting it. They give us a report which has happened, or rather is going to happen, and then we implement that report as provided for in law. And in
an ideal setting, wouldn't that work? But now when the issue became politicized, should he, or do you think he made the right decision by not joining in the fray?
He would not do it because it would be defeatist. Then there would have been no need of forming the task force in the first. I think that's why I said BBI itself failed in terms of communicating, because that mandate was theirs, communicating to Kenyans what their mandate was, what the timelines were, just like they were telling us where they will be. They were telling us, you can bring your report here, we're going to receive it this way, if you can just send it online in this way. That communication on what BBI was, moving from where the president formed that task force and it was put in the Kenya Gazette. The moment something is gazetted, then it becomes legal and it draws resources from the national coffers. So what we are trying to say is the president could not again every day be talking about the BBI and how they stand guided on what to do this, how BBI is about this and the other one. That should have been their work. But, and you know, if you know Uhuru, that's how he operates. He gives you space to work, he gives you space to reason. There are people who have said he should have annihilated a lot of people who have been saying negative things about BBI. He has not done it. There are people who thought he would go to Sagana and say a lot of very nasty things to people who have been antagonizing him and saying a lot of nasty things about BBI. He never did that. He was just there and he said, this report is out, I have not read it myself. So all those versions you're seeing out there are not true. Read it. Let us look at it. When I get it, I'll do enough copies. You guys read it, and then depending on what you like, you say, I like this. Then we can look at what we don't like as individuals and then work around it. So to me, he did not fail. He could not play politics like every other average person. And I think I want to agree with him. He's a statesman. He knows that at a time like now, you are called to be a leader. You cannot afford to be the president of this country and then you're playing politics like every other average politician out there.
But has he effectively boxed himself out of the conversation now? Charles, keep going.
I think the president is still firmly in charge of the BBI, from my point of view. And in looking at this, we need to look at the president as the symbol of national unity. Is a leader who was to be the big man in the entire conversation. That when others are squabbling and pursuing maybe other interests, he becomes the symbol and the embodiment of the national interest, and which up to now I think he has done, because the president has time and again, I think he's not been quiet actually. Every time he's gone around the country, he's kept talking about the BBI, and I think when I look at it, I feel like most of the goals and the objectives of the handshake have been achieved, because right now where we came from, we actually were almost staring at national collapse just after the elections. We're talking about secession and everything and all manner of things. But right now the dividends are being seen in terms of the peace and the national cohesion that we are seeing. What only remains now is to solidify this into a document then that will define a coherent way forward for us to go, that will now specify concrete action points that we need to pursue from there. But the president has been doing that, and when he's doing that, the president is deputized by a deputy. And one of the things is that looking at Deputy President Ruto, and I still want to repeat this because sometimes maybe there are attempts to isolate him.
If it's a repetition, let me ask a question.
Okay, bring it on.
Let me ask a question. Actually, this one comes from Kaine and he's asking what legal framework supports the BBI process?
The BBI is a task force. The president has every right. The president is the one who formed the task force and gazetted it. Yeah, and I think, I don't know whether this matter is still in court, so we don't want to be to discuss a matter that is alive in court. I remember our court's party had gone to court over this, but the bottom line is the moment, because what they wanted was the quashing of that particular gazette notice. The moment the president has formed task forces in the past on even how to parastatals and all that. You remember there was a task force on state corporations and parastatals. That was a task force. But I think the confusion was because of the handshake and the 9 points and the team that is there. You know, when you see a certain individual, you want to see as if the person signing the documents to gazette that is Raila Odinga. But the documents were signed by the secretaries of the cabinet. Kenya. So that is the gazetted. There's a gazette notice saying this task force is in place. The moment that happens, then you can operate. You are legally doing what you're doing as a task force. And I think the moment we remove all these other words and call it a task force, Building Bridges Initiative Task Force, then we'll start seeing it from a legal perspective. Otherwise, there's nothing else to it, and it was formed by the president. That is why the report is being given to the president. If you look at the statement they had given, they said they are giving the president this report as the appointing authority. So I think that is a straightforward issue. It's legally there, and Ken Mijungu stands answered.
Okay, let me throw in one question as you have the last one, Charles Kipkule. I don't throw in one question as I know you said you wanted to bring in the DP, and I'm sure you want to respond also on the legal framework. If the process is legitimate, as those opposed to it have painted it to be, is it akin to slapping lipstick on a pig?
No, I think, Oliver, as Mr. Munyi has mentioned, the legality of the task force is really not something that will be in question, or its legitimacy, because, as he rightly puts, it is appointed by the president. And as I mentioned earlier, the president is a symbol of national unity and is mandated by the constitution to undertake certain actions to make sure that some of these functions that are given unto him by the constitutions are achieved. So through this task force, there was a delegated mandate that the president donated to this task force to work on it. So the question of legality really does not arise in my view. It is perfectly in order. The only illegality will arise if the task force bypasses certain processes in terms of now pushing for their recommendations. For example, if they bypass parliament in terms of now going to introduce a referendum, then it becomes a problem. But if they follow the right path, up to now I've not seen where they have erred in law. But if now they go and bypass, for example, Parliament or even the Senate, and they do not do a report then that goes there, then it becomes an illegality at that point, in my view. But at this point, I do not think they're engaging in an exercise that is out of is illegal. But as I was mentioning earlier on the issue of the president, when he was working, you know, the presidency as we have it right now is that we have a president and a deputy, and the sole responsibility of the deputy president is to deputize. Is the principal assistant. When the president shook hands with Raila, then you support what the president did, but you do not go and shake hands with him because the president was able to do it. You do not then go and deputize that again to shake hands. But in going out there to the country to speak to the people, you echo the sentiments of the president. I think, to be fair to the deputy president, he's been going out, and anytime he speaks about the issues of the BBI, even on the issues of the Big Four, he has a very, I listen to him most of the time in the news and all the time when I read it in newspapers. He speaks about the transformational agenda that he's pursuing with the president, that he's supporting the president to do it. He speaks about that the president has asked us to unite Kenyans, so we'll focus on that. When he speaks now and makes a point that when the BBI comes and we see issues that are outside what the president intends, then he has a duty as a deputy to support the president to ensure that the objectives and the intentions of the BBI are achieved and that they are protected. Because right now, as I see and as I said earlier, there is a lot of misrepresentation and mischaracterization and mismanagement of the process at some levels, but the president has been steadfast in reminding Kenyans that the BBI is about national unity, cohesion, healing the problems of the past, and now living a country that is more united going forward into the future.
Okay. Ken Mijungu, I have just seen your questions. So 30 seconds is okay. Last word, absolutely last word. He wants to know what follows after it's been handed over.
Yeah, what follows is implementation. Not really implementation, is reading and understanding it, so that there's again a process. Remember, these are 9 issues. These 9 issues will not necessarily be implemented in one way. If there are issues of devolution, for instance, then the county government, the county national executive, the Senate, and everyone else will be involved on strengthening those aspects of devolution. If there are issues that require changing the law to align themselves so that those recommendations are there, so it will go to Parliament. So, but if there are issues of redistribution, for instance, because you find places people getting hungry in Turkana when there is ample in other parts of Mount Kenya and Western, then those are issues of policy, if you ask me. So those are things that will be implemented by the national executive very, very quickly. If it's a question of amending the constitution, then we follow the constitution itself in Article 255, 256, 257 on how to amend the constitution, either through Parliament. I believe it should be through Parliament, or through a popular initiative like we had seen, but I don't see popular initiative. But everything, again, like my brother has said, will be aligned in law and the policy frameworks that are there. So I think, to me, what is important is that this is not cut in stone. The recommendations, people can talk about them, people can relate with them, and when it gets out there, if it's a law we are amending, it will come back to us in what is called public participation. We'll have our input in there. If it's a policy issue, the same. So I don't think there is anywhere people are cutting corners, if you ask me.